Welcome back to the football podcast today. We have special guest Jack Murphy and Nate Yaffe. So I think we're going to start here by talking about the NFL playoffs. And I just want to first off talk about the Week 18 Sunday Night Football matchup between the Chargers and the Raiders. What are everyone's thoughts on that game, on the ending of that game specifically?
I think the biggest story there is the Brandon Staley timeout. I mean, obviously, Herbert's heroics on fourth down were impressive, to say the least. But even Derek Carr post-game talked about that Brandon Staley, head coach of the Chargers, when he called that timeout, it kind of changed the mindset for the Raiders. If they had tied, both teams would have gone to the playoffs. Chargers call a timeout. Jacobs gets a 10-yard run, and Raiders kick a field goal to knock the Chargers out of the playoffs. So you have to wonder what would have happened without that timeout.
Yeah, I felt like before that, it was I felt like they were going to just kneel it. It would have been like a respect, like, hey, we fought hard for 5 quarters and we both earned this playoff spot, and just kneel it instead of kicking them out. But I think that timeout made them think the Chargers just wanted to go for the win either way. So I think that kind of changed their mindset. If you were going to try to beat us, we're just going to beat you.
For anyone that doesn't know, Brandon Staley called a timeout late in overtime, basically ruining the chance of a tie, which would send both teams to the playoffs. And they did end up losing the game and are now not in the playoffs. So that was the decision. So do we think Staley will get fired for that? I've heard a lot of differing opinions, especially after all the firings today.
I don't think he's going to be fired at all. He's a good young coach. They need a couple more years to see like where he's at with him. He almost took him to the playoffs. Barring reports, not calling the timeout may have made a difference. Who knows? Because the Raiders would either way had to run multiple plays there just to either cut the clock down or even get in field goal range. But it's definitely a questionable call, especially looking at the Chiefs game a couple weeks ago where they didn't run it at all. They went for it every fourth down. It's an interesting decision with the head coach, but I really don't see him being fired anytime soon.
I mean, I think it's as Mitch alluded to, it kind of showed that the Chargers were trying to win the game because the Chargers wanted the right personnel out there, but the Raiders were obviously just running out the clock. I don't think that's really a fireable offense for trying to win the game, but know the situation. Also, it's a young head coach. You saw once the Chargers were really fully healthy on offense last night for the first time in a while. And you saw once they kind of got things clicking, how explosive that offense can be. And I think that is partly due to Brandon Staley. It's a big difference between the offense we saw with Anthony Lynn last year. So firing a coach just because he tried to win the game, I know it knocked you out of the playoffs. Maybe. We still don't really know what the Raiders were going to do. But firing a coach for that it doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's just too young to make one mistake and you're going to fire him because of that. I think they'll stick with him and see, how he can what he can do for the franchise in the future.
So with all the coaches being fired, I know off the top of my head, the Broncos job, the Vikings job. I know there are a few others that I can't think of right now. What's the most appealing job in head coaching job in sports right now?
I'd say football, I guess. It has to be the Dolphins. Actually, I'd say the Broncos, because that defense is already 100% built. It was a great defense this year. They held teams to under 20 points in the majority of their games, and I think they're a quarterback away from being a contender.
But a lot of teams are a quarterback away, and I mean, it's easier said than done to just get a quarterback.
I agree, but I think, with Drew Lock playing, they didn't even look terrible. I think they were in 4 or 5 one-score games this year. So, I mean, if you add Aaron Rodgers, which is a very good quarterback, and there were rumors that he goes to Denver in the offseason, like last year, I think he could end up going to Denver still, and him with Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, Tim Patrick, Javonte Williams, and their good ass defense. I think they win. I think they make a run.
I think it's definitely much more appealing than any other job. I mean, you don't want to be the coach that comes in and gets rid of Tua, the first round pick, but that's a tough situation. I mean, I definitely agree with Nate. I think it's the best situation to be in for a head coach, where you're that one piece away and you have the supporting cast to make a quarterback you pick in the draft or free agent succeed. You have the weapons; they're going to do well. They're not going into a franchise that's falling apart and putting all the weight on their shoulders. So I'm with you, Nate.
Not to mention that Denver has a more stable coaching situation. Like if you get the coach in Denver, you have a much more stable ground than in Miami, who fired Brian Flores after 2-3 years of being at the helm, when he didn't even do a bad job at all.
I also think
at the end of the day, all these coaches got fired, and if your team doesn't perform, you're gonna get fired. So I don't think it's really from an organizational standpoint stability. But I personally, this might be a little bit of a hot take, but if ownership was better in Jacksonville, I take that job out of the 4 jobs right now. You're going, especially if you're thinking long term. You have a former number 1 overall pick, or this year's number 1 overall pick, in Trevor Lawrence. A ton of cap space heading into the offseason. You have good leadership with veterans like Marvin Jones there. I just think there is some appeal there. It would take work. You're not just if you want to win right away, go to the Vikings. But you're not going to be able to build on that foundation with Kirk Cousins, this big contract. But you have weapons in Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, Dalvin Cook. You have a solid team, but you're not going to do anything special. If I'm a head coach right now, and I am going into low expectations with the ability to improve a team, because you can't really go any lower than what Jacksonville looked like this year. I'm taking the job in Jacksonville.
You mentioned quarterbacks. I want to hear you guys take. What do you think about, the Browns? Do you think they're going to walk away from Baker Mayfield? Do you think the Ravens are even going to consider walking away from Lamar Jackson? I heard that. I read a take on that, just about him staying healthy and things like that. I mean, what do you think the future for those 2 guys are in the AFC North, and even the replacement for Big Ben in the AFC North?
I think Baker Mayfield is as good as gone. He was atrocious this season. He showed no flashes of anything, just inconsistent and just not really able to stretch the field, especially in that run-heavy offense where it's I guess they were stacking the box against him basically every play. Defenses and he still couldn't really move the ball downfield with his arm. So they need to make a change there. And I think that they could look to the Steelers as a place to dump Baker Mayfield, potentially.
Yeah, I disagree. I think the Steelers are looking to just reset completely after this year. I think they're going to head more towards the draft. And also, I don't see a world where Lamar leaves. When he was healthy for the majority of the season, he was in MVP contention. He's still a very good quarterback. I could see him moving Huntley and trying to get a draft pick or a piece to try to push them to the next level. But also, you can't take much from this Ravens season altogether. Their whole team with down injury next year, they literally scrapped up any veteran running back off who is a free agent to try to get production. Next year, they're going to have Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins back. They have a solid receiving core and Andrews, Hollywood, and Rashad Bateman, and they have a good defense when their cornerbacks are back. They're still a contender once they're healthy, but that just didn't happen this year.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think they're going to move away. I read something and I was interested to hear you guys' take. I think the Ravens are in an interesting place right now, and they have a lot of the pieces, so we'll see if they can put it together next year.
Just one thing on Baker Mayfield, though, all initial reports as of right now see the Browns keeping him as their starter for next year. But that's something just to look at if any other reports come out over the offseason.
I wouldn't be surprised if they keep him for now and then go in the draft, take someone high, take someone that they like, and just have him as an option and see if he can do anything if he's recovered from his shoulder injuries. but I don't expect him to have a long future. I think he's too much of a play action quarterback who, when the scheme falls apart, he's not really going to be the guy to get it done for you. So I think they'll keep him for another year.
I disagree with them drafting a quarterback, though. I think they have to go after a top receiver, would have been my guess in that, just because, I mean, you don't draft a quarterback high this year. There's just not a very good quarterback class. There's a lot of good receivers that could help him out. I think you give Baker one more year. If he really does that bad, then you can always draft one the next year or sign one or trade for one. But I don't see if they draft a quarterback, then I think they're moving on from Baker. I don't see him wasting a first round pick and still keeping Baker. The two together.
I do
I
like
see
the
Baker
point
is
of
gone.
well, yeah, Baker's gone, but Mitch does. I was going to say the same
well,
thing, but
I
Mitch makes
think-
an interesting point.
I think Case Keenum's just as good, so I don't see any downside in letting go of Baker. I think Case Keenum yesterday proved that he can be just as mediocre as Baker Mayfield.
I mean, yeah, just as mediocre is not amazing, but I mean, to be fair, they do have minimal weapons at the receiver position. If they end up taking like a Jameson Williams or Garrett Wilson type early in the draft, like I think they have the 13th pick this year. If they end up getting one of them in the first round, I think that could go a long way to helping whatever quarterback is at the helm next season.
The situation this reminds me most of is when the Eagles took Jalen Hurts when they had Carson Wentz. I know that Baker Mayfield isn't anywhere close to what Carson Wentz was in his prime, but I do see them. And if it was a good quarterback class, I would see them taking quarterback first round. But because it's not, to Mitch's point, I wouldn't be surprised if they go ahead and maybe take a receiver or a weapon like you guys were talking about in the first round. And then once it comes back second, they go and take a quarterback. I don't see them paying Baker Mayfield once it's time to like extend him. But you know, you don't just go out there and pay some backup a shit ton of money just to see him go out and put up the same numbers as Baker would. So keep Baker out there one more year. Who knows? You take a guy in the second, third round, let him sit behind Baker Mayfield for a year and learn the offense, and then come in once Baker's gone and maybe he'll light it up. You don't know. But there's nobody in the first round who I think they would be comfortable taking at with the 13th pick, because if you do take someone in the first round this year, he better outperform Baker Mayfield or you're just going to get criticized.
Yeah, I can agree with that, because there's a big difference between what the Eagles did, where they picked him at the end of the second. Like it's a good pick, but they could still build their team, and they're not wasting their best pick when they still had Carson Wentz, and they did move on from Carson Wentz as well. So they planned on moving on anyways, but they didn't waste their top picks. So they're not gonna. You don't draft if you draft a first rounder and you have this guy who you're in question with. I don't think you really keep him. I think you get rid of him.
Who do you think is the first pick?
Kayvon Thibodeau.
Hutchinson's been good, but he looked like a child against Georgia. And I mean, I haven't seen any Thibodeau film at all. I didn't watch a lot of Pac-12, but I don't know. I've heard a lot of differing opinions. So what do you guys think about that pick?
I think he got exposed against Georgia, and I think Thibodeau is the move. I just from a perspective of you didn't see him, get absolutely shut down, and so just by having that negative image in your head of Hutchinson, I think that's going to cause teams to want to go with Thibodeau as first overall. We'll see how they test.
It's all about what you want on day one. I think Thibodeau is more NFL ready right now. I think he's just a bigger, better athlete at the moment. And yeah, Hutchinson's weaknesses were shown in that Georgia game. And I think those are going to get exploited in the NFL. I think he needs a year or two. But I think they're both very talented players, and you don't go wrong with either. I just think Thibodeau's the guy off day one that's more impactful.
I like Thibodeau too. And I know like Hutchinson game, it's one game, but still it has to worry scouts a little bit. I mean, because it's not like he was just, not making an impact. He was just getting manhandled by the offensive line. If you're just going to get, frankly, babied like that, once you hit the NFL level, I mean, scouts have to be worried about now you're going against all professional NFL linemen. It's not just these like college tackles anymore. It's going to be that caliber every single game. So for that reason, I mean, Thibodeau has shown flashes since his sophomore year. He has all the physical tools, has shown he can overpower offensive linemen no matter the opponent. So for that reason, he's my number one guy. I don't even think Husher should go number two. I don't know who should, but I just haven't seen enough. I think there's a lot that can be said about Michigan's scheme. Their D linemen show up every year. And a lot of them, I mean, the Patriots have drafted a lot of them. Not all of them come to fruition. They're good pass rushers, but can they be every down lineman?
I think he just demonstrated he couldn't. I mean, I've heard the excuse, well, Georgia was running the ball all night, so it didn't really, he wasn't able to show up in the pass game like he did. But you see the guys like TJ Watt and JJ Watt, and some of their biggest plays are in the run game and just being able to shut that down. So I just don't see him as an NFL guy or an immediate impact as much as Thibodeau. Obviously, he's going to be an NFL player. Obviously, he's going to be a high round pick,
No, on that Hutchinson not going number two, Danny. I think the Lions trade down. I think Evan Neal is like up there with being a top 3 pick. He's a really good tackle, but like, who are you going to protect? Jared Goff. So I mean, I see them trading down and going to draft like Kenny Pickett at like 10 or something. I could see that happening.
So I'm looking here at an NFL mock draft, and the New York Jets have 2 top 10 picks. They have that number 10 that you were talking about, and they have the 4. I've been following this Jets rebuild for the last few years. Do we think Derek Stingley's the pick at 4? Do we think they go O-line? Like, what do we think's the move here?
I'm a big Neal guy, so if Neal's there at 4, I think you have to go Evan Neal. However, you do have Becton, and I do think Derek Stingley Jr. is the best cornerback in the draft over Sauce. So, and their secondary is terrible, so I don't see how you don't go Stingley. But I'm fine with both Neal and Stingley for them.
I could also see Hamilton because I think he's possibly the best overall player in this class. I just think safeties aren't always as highly scouted of picks that I don't know if I could see him going that high, but I don't think I'd disagree with it if they did take him that high. If not, I see him going Neal before Stingley just because they were Wilson was still getting taken down a lot, and you got to protect your quarterback if you think he's going to be your franchise Q.
And I mean, Stingley's obviously insanely talented, as he was the highest graded cover cornerback as a freshman, a true freshman in 2019. But he's been injured. He has a rough injury history, and I know that oftentimes, I guess, causes people to fall in the draft. But we still think he's the number 1 corner over Sauce Gardner, or is that more of a debate now?
After that Alabama game, I think it's more of a debate just because like the one argument was that he's on Cincinnati and he's not really going against a bunch of studs. But after holding Jamison Williams to 7 for 67, I don't see why, and not allowing a touchdown his entire college career, I don't see why he's not a top 15 pick. I still think Stingley's better, but I mean, it makes it more of a conversation.
Okay, so now on the subject of the NFL playoff, any bold predictions, or are we thinking the regular Kansas City, Tampa Bay, or Green Bay? What are we thinking?
My bold one is I think the Bengals have a solid shot this year. I think they have an easy ride to the AFC Championship with the Raiders and the Titans. I think they should easily be able to win them both. And then I mean they beat the Chiefs last time they played them. I think they're a very good team. I think they could beat the Chiefs, and I think they could beat the Bills or the Pats too. So I have them versus the Packers as a bold prediction.
Derrick Henry coming back. Does anyone know? Derrick
I-
Henry is.
He should be back
probably the
by.
most
He's
important-
back.
Yeah, he should be back. So the Titans have honestly a pretty
He's
good
he's
shot.
gotta be the
activated out
most
of the window, and they
important
have to buy.
player in this playoffs. He's got to be the most important. Not only because of his production, but just because of how defenses have to game plan against him. If you've noticed the last few weeks, teams playing against Tennessee haven't exactly been stacking the box. But I mean, obviously they have to, and that just opens up the game for Tannehill, who is, I would say, an above average quarterback. And that is why Tennessee scares me a little bit as a Patriots fan. But I really don't think they have enough to beat the Chiefs.
I think you asked, whether or not he's going to be back. Do we think he's going to be the same player? I mean, do we have any idea coming off this foot injury that's supposed to be season ending and now he's coming back early and it looks great. But, is Derrick Henry going to be King Henry or is he just going to be another running back there who's bigger? I mean, I think that factors into it massively.
I think he'll be fine, maybe a little bit less steam. But I mean, just the style of his running back, it's not as big of a deal, I don't think, because he's not an elusive back. Like somebody like Saquon Barkley, when he continuously hurts his legs, it's ruining his elusiveness and his explosiveness. Derrick Henry, even if he loses a little speed, he's still going to truck you over. So it doesn't really make a difference. He didn't lose any strength or what really made him King Henry. So maybe he'll be slightly worse, but I still would not want to try to tackle him in the fourth quarter after him running through me 30 times.
If I'm being honest, a lot of Henry's big runs come off of stiff arms, and I don't think you use your legs for that.
You don't think? No. Yeah, no, I agree. But I still, like I said, I still have Kansas City. The Kansas City defense has gotten a lot better as of late, and I think that they can keep that up through the AFC. But also Buffalo is a team that if they could get through New England, they are interesting. I think they have the best shot to take down Kansas City. And if they do, I think they'll get smacked in the Super Bowl, whoever they play. But they are interesting. They can get hot at the right time.
The only thing about the AFC this year, which is really interesting, is that the Chiefs and the Bengals, to me, are really the only like consistent high-powered offenses. There's an argument for the Bills, but to me, the only real weapon there right now is Diggs. Their running game's been okay, but I think once it comes playoff time, and teams really start scheming for them, I just don't see them, dropping 30, 40 points a game. The Bengals and Chiefs, though, consistently rely, or I guess even the Chiefs now, as Baker said, the defense has turned up, but going back, the Chiefs and Bengals have relied on their offenses, but everyone else in the AFC this year, it's been the defenses that have won the games. We saw it with New England when they went on their stretch. It was because the defense was making plays and Mac was able to make a couple throws a game to solidify those victories. So I think in the AFC, it really comes down to who's going to be the best defense. And in the NFC, it's who can outscore the other. I mean, you have Rams Cardinals in the wild card, which is just kind of mind blowing to me. I still like Rodgers. I don't think he's losing this year. I have the Packers winning the Super Bowl personally. But, this is one of those years where there's really no clear favorite. Anyone can really win this thing, which can be seen in the fact that somehow the Titans are the number one seed. I think they're one of the worst number one seeds I've ever seen. I don't get all the hype personally. But I mean, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, on that, I mean, also back to the Chiefs. I mean, you also have to see they have not beat any of the top seeds. They lost to the Titans, they lost to the Bills, and they lost to the Bengals. So anyone saying like they're a free ride is not like they're gonna make it pretty easily is a little questionable because they haven't beaten any of those good teams. And then also on the NFC, do you guys think the Rams have a shot? And also is Cam Akers coming back gonna add a lot of value or not really change much?
I don't really think. I think it'll add another dimension, but not like that much. They've been more of a power running team this whole season, and I don't think you can really change that up as it's work. But Matt Stafford in the playoffs scares me. He doesn't have a lot of experience. He's played 3 games in his playoff career. He's lost them all, and he hasn't been particularly great in any of them. So he would make me nervous if I were a fan of the Rams. But I think they beat the Cardinals in the first round. The Cardinals are way too inconsistent. I think they beat them in the first round and then don't really make a run as a lot of people would expect them to.
Yeah, I think the entire NFC is a bunch of pretenders besides Green Bay. I mean, you saw it this year. You know, the Rams, they can trade with the Cardinals. They trade with the Niners, I'm pretty sure. I think that it's kind of just like a toss-up of basically who faces Green Bay in the NFC Championship. You know, I think the Niners are my dark horse there. I just think they're a very talented team. I think they have a bunch of athletic weapons. You know, Debo Samuel's fun to watch. Kittle's just great. I think Elijah Mitchell's very good. So, you know, I think that team can go deep. I think their defense is talented. But like I said, I just think all the NFC teams are head and head with each other. Like, I don't think there's a huge difference between Dallas and LA at all.
And by the way, LA actually lost both games to the Niners.
Exactly my point. Like, I just think that no one here is as good as their record says, besides Green Bay.
I have a little bit of breaking news. I know we're primarily a football podcast, but this is a quote from a reporter on the Portland Trailblazers. Quote, "Don't be surprised if Damian Lillard has played his last game of the 2021-2022 NBA season." This is due to an injury. I didn't even know he was injured.
It was an abdomen injury, right?
An abdomen injury. And do we think that's his last game with the Blazers?
Unless the Blazers land Ben Simmons, I think it's or Draymond Green, apparently, for whatever reason. I think it's Dame's last game there. Especially this injury might be like a sign to him, like, okay, like I'm nearing the end of my career. Like I'm obviously not as healthy as I used to be. So it's like now or never. I mean, we saw it. I mean, we see it all the time, really. Like players say they're loyal, and they keep saying they're loyal, and they keep saying they're loyal, and then they get to a point where like, okay, like I'm done with this. Like I have to get out of here. There's been this buildup for a while, and I think it's reached just apex. I would not be surprised if it's Dame's last game, but I think there is the question of like, where is he gonna go? I don't know who really has the pieces right now to trade for a guy like that, because the Trailblazers don't want Westbrook. They don't want Simmons for Dame. So, and I mean, would the Celtics give up Tatum or Jalen for Dame? I don't know.
Probably.
They probably would, but who knows? So I just don't know where that destination is and what the Trailblazers would need to get him, like to get back to deal him. But he's definitely done in Portland.
I'm a little nervous that this is a similar situation to Kawhi on the Spurs a bunch of years back, where he had this injury. It was a little iffy about exactly what it was. It's just nagging abdominals. Just a nagging injury. And I think that they're just shutting him down as more of like he doesn't want to play for this team anymore. We're one of the worst teams in the Western Conference. And I think that it's more of a mutual, like, parting ways in the most unofficial way that they could possibly part ways. But I could see him ending up in Sacramento. I've heard that the Kings are looking to move on from. They haven't outright said it, but they could look to move on from De'Aaron Fox. And they have pieces, they have draft capital, but yeah, I don't know. I could see that happening.
I don't see him going to the Kings just because I think them moving on from De'Aaron Fox. I think they like what they see in Halliburton, so I don't think it's they really want to get another point guard. I think maybe they'd want a different piece to fill out the roster with. But I also think he's kind of like Aaron Rodgers situation where it's like he stayed loyal for so long and they've continued to not build a good team around him. The only difference is Rodgers is making it work, and he's just so good that even though they never get him a new weapon, he makes use of the weapons that he has, and it's looking like he might get his championship, but Dame's nowhere near close. So I think it's time where like everyone feels bad and nobody's gonna ever blame Dame for leaving the Blazers.
Well,
My thing is with
Rodgers. Hang on one sec. Rodgers just isn't getting new pieces. He still has like a top 3 receiver in the league and a defense that's playing well, and Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon. They just didn't keep Jake Kumaro.
A good old line
or whatever. Like, yeah, he still has a good team around him. Dame has been playing. Best piece he's had is CJ McCollum, who's good, but he's not great. So I wouldn't say the situation is similar. I get what you're saying about management not really complying to the players' like asks, but I don't know. I don't see it.
My thing with the NBA is that super teams are just like kind of eliminating loyalty. It's loyalty or legacy now. And if you want to win, you usually have to team up with someone now. You can't do it yourself. So I don't know. I feel like Dame's definitely, whether it's this year is his last or in this time coming, he's done with Portland. He can't win there, and he knows that. And it's either he is going down in the books as a loyal teammate for 17 years, and he's gonna get a cool rap about that, or he's gonna, want to win, and cement his legacy and try to be a Hall of Famer. And I feel like
we're
the second option because who wouldn't?
Yeah, and while we're on NBA, and then I'll throw it back to the NFL because this is something that Giants fans have wanted to happen for a while. 2 more reports came out. The Celtics do not plan on splitting up Tatum and Jalen. And Jonathan Collins is frustrated with the Hawks. So those are 2 more NBA headlines as we approach the NBA trade deadline. But lastly, Dave Gettleman, the Giants general manager, who fans have wanted out of there for so long, is finally planning on stepping down. Maybe now they won't take Kenny Pickett with the 5th overall pick, and avert disaster.
Reminder that Joe Judge is still the coach there, and he's going to be the coach next year.
Yeah, no, he's not. He was.
No, it's literally.
Yeah, I doubt that.
There have been reports that saying Judge is not.
He was clearing out his
Reports
office
from
yesterday.
where?
From inside New York's organization.
There was a tweet that he
Inside the
cleared
New
out his
York
office
organization
yesterday
where
after the game.
And Dave Gettleman just quit, so they're gonna have new general manager. Unless he gets promoted, I highly, what's the word? Highly doubt. Thank you. That Joe Judge will be the coach of the Giants next year, just because with new general manager usually comes new staff, and he is terrible.
But bigger, they'd probably be impressed with the 3rd and 9 QB sneak.
That was a really interesting play. Can we talk about that? What was that? What even was that?
That's straight out of Sharon.
Giving up.
That's straight out of Sharon High School playing.
Well, we ran the
called
QB
zero
sneak
confidence
for
in your
about 5 yards a pop, so at least ours was effective. Yeah.
Yeah, at 6:26 p.m. yesterday, Joe Judge
on Jake
pictured
from State Farm.
clearing out his office in New York.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I mean, the Giants, they're not doing anything right now with the weapons they have, and they clearly need to make a change.
You know what I bet happened on that 3rd and 9? Joe Judge probably got the call. He's like, "Yo, it's 3rd and 9. You're not getting anywhere. Your quarterback is Jake from State Farm. Like, you're not getting anywhere. You're fired." So then he said, "Okay, I hate this team. I'm gonna run a QB sneak on 3rd and 9 from my own 3-yard line and just see what happens." And it didn't work. So that's why he was clearing out his own. All right, I think we're gonna wrap it up there. Thank you for listening to the podcast, and we will be back. Yeah.